Hi, I'm Ricky with Recap Animation. Destroy that like button for more great content, thank you. The story begins as our protagonist explains that he just died because of God's mistake and is now being sent to live a new life in a new world. However, in return for selecting all the abilities he could ever want, he has decided to sacrifice every memory he had of his past life. He mentions how attractive the goddess of reincarnation is, but laments how he won't remember her. We then learn that his name is Kelvin. And we watch as he wakes up completely confused. A menu appears before him and explains that he had been chosen to be reincarnated. The female voice goes on to say that he is now in a fantasy world filled with magic and monsters, and the skills he chose have already been given to him. His status menu shows that Kelvin chose to be a summoner that also gets large boosts to his stats whenever he levels up. Kelvin was confused and afraid at first, but admits now that things are getting exciting. They head to a nearby guild, and the menu explains that no one had ever asked her, the goddess of reincarnation named Melfina, to become their follower. That is until Kelvin came along. He can't believe his previous self would do something so bold, and Melfina explains that they can communicate because summoners can speak with their servants. She goes on to explain that his previous self had professed his love for her, immediately showering her with several compliments. She was growing bored with her mundane life and decided to accept his invitation to come along. Kelvin wants her to stop treating his reincarnation like a vacation and demands she return his memories. However, she reveals that his past self was the one that requested all his memories be erased to get as many skill points as possible. His past self exclaimed that forgetting his love for her won't matter either, since he is confident Kelvin will just fall in love with her again. He becomes curious to see what she looks like, but is disappointed to hear that he doesn't have nearly enough magic power to summon her just yet. When registering as an adventurer, it is explained to him that being a summoner is ultra rare, and that typically only one can be found for every nation. Their rarity usually attracts unwanted attention, as the nation's rulers will surely seek them out to have them work for them. Kelvin would like to avoid that attention for now, so that he can enjoy his freedom, and decides to alter his application to show that he is a green mage instead. He is given an F rank to start, and it's explained that jobs are separated based on the ranks. Adventurers can take jobs from ranks 1 level above theirs, but they will receive a penalty for failing. After completing 10 jobs in a row regardless of difficulty, adventurers will go up in a rank. Finally, after reaching rank C, they will also have to begin taking exams. Melfina recommends that he picks a job that calls for him to defeat 3 blue slimes. Since he can also try forming a contract with one, Kelvin agrees. And moments later we see that he has used all his money on a wooden rod. It doesn't do much to increase his stats, but he needed a weapon for the first job. After a bit of searching, he finally finds a group of slime, and Melfina explains that he should use his appraising eye ability to gain information on them. She says that his appraising eye is already ranked S and allows him to assess enemies 100 levels above him as well as any items that are rank S. Kelvin realizes that he couldn't see her stats earlier, which means Melfina is clearly above level 100. He focuses on his mission though, and prepares to form a contract. Melfina explains that he must first gain his target's consent, but for creatures that don't understand speech, it's best to attack and weaken them without killing them first. Seeing as how a magical spell will likely kill the small slimes, Kelvin decides to use physical attacks. He is shocked to find that the task is not as easy as he thought it would be. Melfina imagines that the slime is probably taunting Kelvin, and he reminds himself that he shouldn't resort to magic. The slime has exceptional agility, but Kelvin makes an adjustment and manages to knock off a bit of its horsepower. Kelvin starts forming the contract, but begins to feel as if he is being drained of energy. Melfina explains that the ability uses half of his magic power, regardless of whether it's successful. He continues the process, and luckily the contract formation is successful. Kelvin decides to name it Clotho, and Melfina explains that he can communicate with all his servants without using words. They are also able to use a network that allows them to speak with each other as well, using some of his remaining magic power. Kelvin summons Clotho. Kelvin says that slime grows when defeating other slimes though, but lets Clotho decide if he wants to do the job. The murderous little slime is clearly excited to fight, and Kelvin tells it to absorb all the slime at once, but to leave the cores so he can turn them in for his job. Kelvin uses his remaining magic power to use the basic spell Melfina taught him to defeat a slime and watches as Clotho easily dominates the others. It's obvious now that forming the contract has boosted his slime stats. Melfina explains that it's because he is an S-rank summoner, and all his servants get a 100-point boost to all stats after joining him. Kelvin realizes why summoners are in such high demand now, and Melfina goes on to reveal that he is the only S-rank summoner in existence. The others are far weaker, only B or C rank, and they can only manage to boost their servants by 10 or 20 points. Clotho manages to defeat the last line on his own, and they head back to collect the reward. Kelvin plans to use the money to get an inn for the night, but stops for a moment when he stumbles upon a group trading slaves. He considers forming a contract with one of the girls and overhears the man explaining that they are valuable half-elves. Kelvin locks eyes with one of them but decides to leave. They then arrive at one of the cheaper inns in town, and Kelvin dreams of one day owning a home that has somewhere he can bathe. And Melfina reminds Kelvin that he needs to work hard. That way he can summon her, and she will be able to eat some food. Kelvin thinks for a moment about how grateful he is to have two companions and wonders who else waits for him in the future. Days later, Kelvin explains that he and Clotho had been taking jobs and leveling up. Thanks to his double skill points and double growth rate, he received a ton of bonuses and 100 skill points for leveling up. He chose a rank D concealment skill from a huge list and explains that leveling up also gave Clotho the rank F absorbing skill. Kelvin later finds that his work has paid off when he is promoted to rank E adventurer. The guild attendant named Ange is surprised to see that he hasn't joined a party yet, and he thinks about how he can't, since that would surely reveal that he is a summoner. Melfina points out though that leveling up alone has brought him unwanted attention from jealous adventurers. The attendant can tell Kelvin is planning to go on a D-rank job next and recommends he upgrade his gear first. A man named Kessel had been listening and tells Kelvin that he should take down a black ghost knight if he really wants a challenge. Kessel just finished a rank D job and introduces himself to Kelvin as a rank D adventurer. However, everyone in the guild knows that Kessel is as strong as a B rank and gossips about how Kessel enjoys crushing new adventurers. They can tell that Kessel is now going after the cocky new guy, but decide not to say anything. After being intimidated, Kessel invites Kelvin to join his party in defeating a black ghost knight, but Ange exclaims that it would be far too dangerous for him. Kessel promises to watch his back, but Kelvin declines anyway, saying that he is too low ranked to be of any use. Kelvin analyzes Kessel to find that his stats are as high as Clotho's, but what worries him most is that he somehow has the title of the murderer. Kelvin is curious, so he decides that they should compete to see who can defeat the Black Ghost Knight first instead. Kessel is shocked that Kelvin plans to go solo, but agrees with his idea. Kelvin knows that he will be walking into Kessel's trap, but reveals that he wants to show off what he has gained from working so hard. The guild attendants think it's a bit odd how he is mumbling to himself, but still ask that Kelvin be careful in his job. We then see that a member of Kessel's group used an appraising eye on Kelvin. However, he couldn't detect anything, since Kelvin has the concealment skill, and Kessel begins to wonder what he is trying to hide. The other member becomes excited to see that he has another rookie to beat up, and Kessel hopes that Kelvin will be able to entertain him for a while. That night, Kessel's group arrives at a castle to find that all the undead monsters have already been defeated. Kelvin reveals himself and they conclude that he is weak based on his poor equipment. The group sees that he was waiting for them and assumed that Kelvin was too scared to fight the Black Ghost Knight on his own. However, Kelvin reveals that he just wanted to make sure they wouldn't interrupt the fight and has decided to fight them all first. They are shocked to see that Kelvin knew about their plan and for some reason still decided to come alone. Kessel wonders if he is actually a bounty hunter after his two party members' bounties. Kelvin explains that this is not the case and antagonizes the big guy into attacking him. The man is caught in a simple magic spell Kelvin set up earlier, and the others realize he must have concealed it. After Kelvin uses another magic attack, Kessel's other member runs away, but is stopped by the summon Clotho. He has already evolved from a blue slime to a glutonia and has gained the title Devourer. Kelvin then recalls the moment little Clotho had evolved into the legendary Quasi-Demon King class monster and how excited they both were. Clotho then makes quick work of the two members, and Kelvin proves that Kessel has no chance against him, forcing Kessel to admit he is too strong. Kelvin realizes that they must have been attacking adventurers instead of monsters to earn experience, and he plans to turn them in later. For now, though, he proceeds forward to encounter the knight, and Melfina is shocked to see that he is not scared at all. Instead, Kelvin is excited at the thought of having the knight join his party. The knight can speak, and Kelvin introduces himself as a summoner that wants to form a contract with him. The knight is delighted to see that someone has decided to talk first instead of attacking immediately like they usually do. He explains that he only became a monster a short time ago and used to be a knight captain serving his country. Before that, he isn't sure why it happened, but decided that he would protect the castle for the time being. Kelvin is shocked to see how nice the knight is, and Melfina assumes it's because he finally has someone to talk to. After eating some weird tasting candy, Kelvin must be reminded by Melfina about forming a contract with the knight. Explains that his king and his country no longer exist, and he is willing to serve a new king. Kelvin understands that he must prove himself first, and the two prepare to fight. The knight introduces himself as Gerard and is surprised to see that Kelvin wants to fight someone much stronger than he is. After Gerard manages to block several attacks, Melfina reveals that he has the mind's eye, a skill that gives a bonus to any decision that requires instant reactions. Their dangerous battle rages on, and Kelvin can't help but be impressed. Gerard is held in place for a moment and begins to have a memory of his past. He remembers how his king declined siding with the elves, and how they in turn spread disease throughout their kingdom. This resulted in the death of his family and the fall of his country. Gerard realizes now that avenging his nation is what keeps him in this world and breaks free of Kelvin's spell. However, Kelvin uses a combination of spells and works together with Clotho to unleash an extremely powerful attack that manages to defeat Gerard. The next day, everyone celebrates as Kelvin completed the difficult job while also ending Kessel's crimes. Ainge explains that the head of the guild is extremely grateful after realizing that the job was much more difficult than a rank D and has decided to award him with a special rank increase. Ainge expresses how surprised she is that he managed to end the life of the powerful knight, and Kelvin can only agree. However, moments later we see that Gerard is still alive as he wonders if Ainge would make a good candidate for his new king's harem. Melfina takes exception to the idea, and Kelvin must beg that they all stop arguing in his head. We then get a glimpse of the moment Gerard was defeated and pledges loyalty to his new king. Back to the present, Kelvin runs into Leo, the head of the guild. He is impressed with Kelvin and can see why everyone is talking about him. Kelvin is surprised to see that he is being analyzed, and even more surprised when Leo asks if he is from another world. Kelvin's own analysis reveals that Leo's appraising eye is at a higher level than he can conceal, and realizes he won't be able to hide anything from him. Leo can clearly tell he is a summoner, and Kelvin regrets letting his guard down after thinking there would not be anyone around with a rank A appraising eye. His servants explained that he wasn't going to be able to keep his secret forever, and it is important for him to find trustworthy people with him to share his secret. Kelvin admits to it, and Leo thanks him for his help in stopping Kessel. He explains that he couldn't do it himself because his hands were tied for political reasons. Kelvin wants to move on to more pressing matters, and Leo explains that he shouldn't be so skeptical of them becoming friends, since he has encountered others from another world before. Leo mentions the heroes of the Holy Empire of Daramus, and Melfina remembers reincarnating them as well. Leo explains that the heroes were summoned by the priestess of Daramus to protect them against the revival of the Demon King. He assumes that the Demon King's revival is why the Black Ghost Knight and all monsters, in general, have become stronger recently. Kelvin realizes that he is planning to have the heroes fight the Demon King and wants him to help protect the town in their absence. Leo says he will pay him for the jobs and even increase his adventure rank. Most importantly though, Leo knows that Kelvin was hiding his power so that he can avoid being involved in a power struggle between nations, and promises his freedom. In return for his help, Leo plans to help Kelvin reach his full potential without anyone else knowing, and so he agrees. Later, the innkeeper Claire celebrates Kelvin's quick ascension to rank B. She makes him lunch first though, and Gerard wonders if Claire is also a candidate for Kelvin's harem. The goddess then describes the heroes she reincarnated as smart-looking, attractive guys and girls that should be at a decent level by now. She explains that she has gotten tired of dealing with demon kings though, and requests that Kelvin stay out of their battle. He then summons Clotho so that he can retrieve his reward money from Clotho's inventory, and explains that it's time to go shopping. However, Melfina is surprised to hear that what he intends to purchase is actually a slave. Gerard isn't surprised though, since boys his age tends to think about things like that. Kelvin explains he is only trying to enhance his party. He admits that his fight with Gerard was a little too close for comfort and plans to train the elf girl so that she can become a powerful asset. When he arrives, he is shocked to see a man refuse to buy the elf girl, and the trader explains that she has a curse that burns anyone that touches her. A quick check shows she hasn't used any of her own skill points yet, and Melfina explains that it will take a rank A white magic spell to break the curse. The girl is disappointed to see Kelvin leave, but he returns later. The trader is shocked that someone wants to buy the cursed elf, but gladly takes Kelvin's money for her. The elf girl would then express her gratitude and introduce herself as Elful. She became a slave immediately after being born and doesn't even know what her parents look like or why she is cursed. Elful fears she will bring harm to Kelvin, but he asks that she trust him. He frees her from her curse and promises that from now on she won't have to suffer anymore. Elful sobs in relief and Kelvin explains to Molfina how he obtained the skill by using his remaining skill points from leveling up. Molfina decides that Elful can have her master for now, but he will be all hers when Kelvin is eventually able to summon her. Kelvin then brings her to the inn where Claire explains that she can't allow a cute girl like her to eat in such ragged clothing. Elful is a bit timid at first, but relaxes when she realizes she isn't setting people on fire. Claire takes her for her makeover. Kelvin waits patiently and is speechless when he finally sees Elful again. After he regathers himself, Kelvin tells her she is beautiful, and Elful promises not to let him down. They enjoy a delicious meal, and Kelvin explains everything. He introduces Elful to the others in their party and explains that it all must be kept a secret. He has her select the same skills he has, but allows her to choose how to use the rest of her skill points. Everything had gone exactly as planned, but the only problem now is that Claire didn't have any rooms with 2 beds, and Kelvin is finding it difficult to get sleep. Thanks for watching this summoner story. This is part 1. If this video gets 1,000 likes, I'll make a part 2. Future parts will be in a pinned comment below.